Hi everyone, welcome back to Preferably Pre-K. I'm Miss Espinoza, and in today's video, I'm going to be sharing 10 teacher tips for new teachers. And when I was coming up with these tips, I did keep in mind to try to keep them universal. So I do believe that these tips are applicable to any kind of grade level teacher, elementary, middle school, or high school. So let's jump right in. So tip number 1 would be to get to know your school and your community. And I know whenever I got hired, it actually happened to be my elementary school. So I knew where everything was. I knew the layout of the school. So I kind of skipped that part, but I think it's a really good idea to just make sure that you get a chance to actually tour your school, especially if you are in elementary school. When it comes time to your enrichment or ancillary, you know where to take your kids. Another little aspect that I think can be overlooked is just being aware of just all the different positions there are. I teach at a pretty big elementary school. We have about 65 teachers, and that's not even including the administration and the office staff and just all the other paraprofessionals. But I think it's good to just know who all is at your school and what kind of resources you have. It's a really great idea to really get to know your front office staff as well. At my school, they're just fabulous, and I have a really good relationship with most of the front office staff. So we need like school supplies last minute. We are supposed to fill out a form, but sometimes I'll make exceptions. So I think it's good to just get to know all of the office staff, the janitors, because you never know when you might need their help as well. Tip number 2 would be to find a mentor. In my school district, we are assigned a mentor as a first-year teacher. Now, I know that the situation is very different depending on the state, the county, the district that you're teaching at. So as a beginning brand new teacher, I hope that you have that resource available. If not, hopefully you are able to find someone in your grade level or someone in your school that is able to help you. Now, I had a great mentor, and it actually happened to be her last year teaching, and then she retired. In a way, it was extra lucky because when she did leave, she left me a lot of books and materials, so that's something to watch out for too. Watch out for teachers that are retiring in your school because sometimes they give away things. And I actually got to be a mentor last year, and I really enjoyed it. It was still really fresh in my mind how I felt my first year, so I tried to be as helpful as possible to my mentee. So tip number 3 would be to network with other teachers. You are going to have a lot of things to do your first year, but I think it's also important to just get to know your teammates and your grade level because they're going to be the most valuable to you. They are going to be the ones to walk you through the trenches that first year. And just creating relationships with other teachers can lead to other opportunities. For example, I know the school counselor at my school just got another position. She started out as a teacher, but she will no longer be in the classroom, so she went ahead and gave me some of her teaching resources. I've also kind of been involved with the special ed team. So when an opportunity arose this past school year, the special ed department was awarded money for dyslexia trainings, and I was chosen as one of the teachers to get trained, which is a really neat experience. Other teachers are going to be your number 1 resource because they've been there. We've all been there, so every teacher can offer you different insight, and even just stepping into another person's classroom gives you so many great ideas how their classroom space is set up. Different teachers have learned different little tricks and hacks throughout the years, so it does not hurt to just walk into somebody else's classroom just to look around. And another good way to network as well, which is something that I just started doing, is joining Facebook groups or following other teachers on Instagram. And even right now, this community that is being built on YouTube through teacher vlogs is really incredible. And that was one of the reasons why I wanted to join in, because it's another way to be helpful and resourceful to other teachers. And so, for example, some of the Facebook groups that I'm a part of are like Texas pre-K teachers, and really just different kind of pre-K and kinder Facebook groups. And teachers post so many ideas there. They ask questions. So again, it's just a really good community to be learning from other teachers, even online. And I'm sure that even though I am part of these really specific pre-K kinder groups, I'm sure there's similar groups available for other grades. And to wrap it up on this tip, I would also really recommend for you to set up an observation, at least one observation at any time during the school year. So if you can, schedule an observation. It could be somebody on your campus or it can be somebody in another campus. So tip number 4 would be to establish positive relationships with your students and your parents. So of course, get to know your students, and one of the ways that I do that is through student surveys. And it's a survey that I give them the very first time that I meet them, and I ask them questions. So I get to know a little bit of background about their child, like if they have any siblings, what languages they speak at home, if they have any fears or weaknesses, any allergies, just things along those lines that will help me get an idea of that child. Something else that would be great would be if you are able to call parents kind of within the first 2 weeks of school and just let them know, hey, I'm really enjoying having your child in my classroom, and just mention something positive about their child. That way, if you have to call parents, you started off on that positive foundation, and if you need their help, hopefully they'll be more willing to help you, because you're not calling them to complain about their child. Kind of gives that impression of you are really truly trying to help their child. And then I personally like to schedule parent-teacher conferences towards September, October. Kind of just depends how crazy my group is that year. But during parent-teacher conferences, I walk my parents through basically our daily schedule and how our day runs through, and I talk about all the different skills that we'll be learning throughout the year and how they can support at home. And then speaking of establishing really positive relationships with students, it actually reminds me of one of my high school teachers, Mr. Elizondo. He was one of the most unique teachers I've had, and part of what made him so unique was that within the first week of school, he gave everybody, every single student that was in his classroom got a nickname. And so, for example, my name starts with a Y. He called me Yardbirds. And it's really neat because even now, like, I have him as a friend on Facebook. Every time it's my birthday, he'll be like, happy birthday, Yardbirds. And I see that he still does that with his students. So I just think that's really neat. Now, tip number 5 is to establish clear routines and procedures. And that sounds so much easier than it is because there's so much that goes into this. For example, think about how you want your classroom to run from the moment that your students walk into your classroom. Are you going to be standing at the door to greet them? Or do they just walk in? What do they do with their belongings? Do they have a space at a desk or a table where they put it? I personally have little hooks, and I know this can be very different, varying by classrooms and by school, but what do they do after they put their things away? Do they have breakfast in the classroom? How do they clean up their breakfast? Do they have an activity to do if they finish breakfast early? What is your restroom procedure? How do they get supplies in your classroom? Is there an area where the students will go and get their materials, or will you have them at tables? Would you have them individually? What are your classroom expectations or rules? And I think what's important about rules is that kids need to understand why those rules are in place. So I always focus on the safety aspects of those rules. Why is it important to use walking feet? What can happen if we're running? So if your classroom is too noisy, how will you get their attention? Are you going to have classroom jobs? If so, how often are you going to rotate those classroom jobs? Do they have work centers? How are they going to rotate through their work centers? How do they line up? What are your cafeteria expectations? So tip number 6 would be to stay organized. This also sounds much simpler than it actually is, but again, a lot of different things going on. I think organization is going to be a really big factor in how your first year is going to go. So I absolutely recommend some sort of planner or calendar so that you can write down important dates. That is something that I do every single school year. I personally like just a good old-fashioned planner, and I always just get mine from Target. I'm not very picky. So for example, this is the planner I got this year, and I already kind of got started a little bit with my planner. And so I always go ahead and look at my district academic calendar and I write those dates in first. What days do we not have school? Do we have early dismissal? Professional development days? Any extra meetings? When are grades due? If there's any field trips? Any special events going on school? There is so much to keep track of. So absolutely have some sort of calendar or planner. If you prefer something digital like your Google Calendar, that works perfectly. Just find something that works for you. Another big component of staying organized is just really trying to figure out how you're going to organize your classroom. For example, like if you make copies, are you going to make copies for the week, for 2 weeks? Where are you going to keep them? How will you organize homework? And I personally don't have to worry about grading, but if that's something you have to worry about, where are you going to keep your graded work? And as far as staying organized, even with your electronic files, most of my teaching resources are digital files that I printed, so I like to organize those as well. I know it can be really tricky. There's so much for you to figure out as far as organization. And so for example, when I print off my digital file, I personally have binders. And in pre-K we teach in themes, so I have a binder that's themes 1 through 3 and it will have everything already printed ready for me to just pull out. So for example, my personal organization involves binders and just big heavy duty bins. There's one binder here. This is like my sight word binder. So I have like my school district high frequency words list, and then I have just all of my sight words organized. This is how I organize some of my material. It works really great for me. Tip number 7 is be prepared to spend money out of pocket. And that is so sad and something I honestly didn't even realize until I went into my classroom my first year, was how much money you spend in your classroom. Your first year is going to be inevitably expensive unless you are really lucky and happen to walk into a classroom that has most of the things that you need. I would suggest not to buy anything until you actually get to see your classroom, because you don't know how much space you're gonna have to work with, and you also just don't know what's already available. So once you're in your classroom and you figure out what you need in your classroom, I would make an Amazon wish list and just share that with your friends and family. If you teach in a Title I school, you will also have the opportunity to make a donors choose list, and you can share that out with your friends and family too. I had some material when I walked into my classroom my first year, but I did still have to buy a lot of things out of pocket. And my next video is actually going to focus on 20 must-have pre-K items. And if you happen to not have the resources that you need, I would prioritize, make sure that they're things that are truly going to make your classroom run smoother. Tip number 8 is to be patient with yourself. You are not going to have time to do everything. Let me repeat that. You will not have time to do everything that you want, because it's just impossible. Again, it goes back to staying organized and just having reasonable weekly and daily goals for yourself. And I know this is hard. Try not to work at home, but if you do, give yourself time to cut off and say no more. I'm done working on school things for the day. Yeah, teaching is a lot of trial and error. You're gonna try things that work, you're gonna try things that don't work, and it's okay because you're just figuring out what's best for you and your kids. You're also kind of just figuring out what your teaching style is, and there's so much growth to happen. So don't compare yourself to other teachers. Tip number 9 would be to make time for self-care. So again, going back to making sure you just have a time where you're just like, okay, after 8 p.m., I'm just gonna stop. No more schoolwork, just gonna relax. Do not burn yourself out. You need time to relax. And to be honest, I didn't really get to that point in my first year, probably up until spring break. And then that's when I realized I really need to find a specific activity that is me time. And I joined the YMCA and discovered Zumba, and I really love it. Really just going to the YMCA and sitting in the steam room. That is what I look forward to on my gym days. It just becomes an activity that you should look forward to. Just do your best to stay healthy because you will get sick your first year. I can remember getting really sick every single school year. I've gotten something, and it's always something different too. Well, actually, my first 2 years, I got really bad stomach bugs where I had to miss like 2 or 3 days. Oh, that was unpleasant. This past school year, I don't even know what I came down with. It was the whole week of Thanksgiving break, so I guess at least I got to recover at home without having to worry about things from school. I had a fever. I got pink eye. Like, I cannot remember the last time I had a fever or pink eye. I had the worst sore throat of my life. I had body aches. Like, it was horrible. So just be prepared. Kids are yucky and they will get you sick, especially if you're in elementary. Just make sure that you're eating well, load up on that vitamin C. But that also brings me to my next point about just being prepared and leaving substitute work. I know for pre-K and kinder, it's definitely a little more easier. I'm a big fan of the MoFat girls from Teachers Pay Teachers, so I have a couple of their packets and I just print that off. I honestly just leave busy work ready to go in case I have to miss a day. And my last tip number 10, would be to have a change of clothes in your class. And I know this is kind of like a really random tip, but let me tell you why it's a good idea. This happened my second year of teaching. I had woken up my kids from nap, and then we were sitting on the carpet for circle time, just singing songs, trying to wake up. And when we finished, I got up and my butt was wet. And I was like, why is my butt wet? I looked down at the carpet and I sat in kid pee. I guess it was just like a little bit because you couldn't really notice it on the carpet. Clearly I didn't realize it until I got up and my butt was damp. That kind of sucked because I didn't have extra clothes, and I mean, it was already, we probably had about an hour left in our day, so it was just pointless for me to try to go home to change, so I had to keep my pee pants. So after that, the very next day, I picked out a pair of black slacks and like a gray top, so that's like my emergency outfit that I keep in my classroom. I also have another example that actually happened to one of my teacher friends this past school year. She's a special ed teacher, and one of her kids was running in the classroom and he tripped and busted his face open, and his immediate reaction was to run towards her. He comforted, but all of his blood got on her clothes, so she did have to go home and change. If you can, I would really recommend for you to just keep a spare change of clothes in your car, in your classroom. You just don't know, or maybe you spill your lunch on yourself. And I know it's really random, but I really recommend it. But that's the end of my 10 teacher tips. I really hope that this was helpful to you. If it's gonna be your first year teaching, the best of luck, you've got this. And for pre-K and kinder teachers, I'm really excited about my next video. I picked out 20 must-have classroom items, so stay tuned for that. Thank you so much for watching. Stay safe and see you guys next time. Bye.